I had always been a little jealous that my wife had seen more of the United States than I have, which is a little interesting because she lived in Germany for her first 25 years. So one year we decided to even the playing field just a bit and to visit the Grand Canyon together. We planned it to go in May, thinking it would not be too hot and there would be less tourists. We booked a flight to Phoenix. Most major airlines then had just started charging extra baggage fees. $25 per bag per trip. Now, before I continue in this sermon, I want to warn you, at some point I'll slip into my Wisconsin accent and I will start saying bag and not bag. I think that's so. So when I found out that this extra surcharge on checked luggage, when I found out about it, I was outraged. The trip would cost an extra $100. But what if I could get around this by checking nothing? What if we put everything we needed for our week-long trip in our carry-ons? After all, we were going to hike down to the Colorado River and camp in the backcountry. We didn't need that much. I found out what the weight limits were, and we packed each backpack as full as possible. We took the bare minimum of everything. I remember when we boarded the plane and got on, we could not find an overhead compartment big enough. We searched, and finally airline staff helped push it in, stuff it into an overhead compartment. Since my carry-on backpack was so jammed and in an overhead compartment, I couldn't get out anything during the flight. After arriving in Phoenix, we drove and drove upward in elevation and arrived at the South Rim. I looked out and saw that big, old, inspiring, ancient gap. It was all worth it. And I saved $100 in the process. You see, people from Wisconsin, we like saving money and getting deals. And if you say to someone from Wisconsin, "I like your sweater," people won't just say, "Thank you." They'll say, "I got it on sale. It was $9 at Kohl's." So that first night, we camped on the South Rim. It got cold, real cold. It started to snow. And to save space in our carry-ons, we did not pack any warm clothes with us. My wife, one of the stronger environmentalists I know, slept in the car with it running. So, lesson learned. I should have spent a little bit more money and checked some baggage. Yes, baggage is a cliche, and maybe the great literary Unitarians like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Louisa May Alcott are frowning from their graves in Concord, Massachusetts. However, I still find it a metaphor that works. Our baggage are those issues and ways of being from our past that we carry with us into our present relationships and present experiences. That stuff we bring with us can be good and it can be bad. Our baggage makes us who we are. But how do we decide what to bring as a carry-on, and what luggage do we decide to check? Our brains, they do magnificent things. With practice, they make us into dancers, into athletes. Our brains give us consciousness, that sense of a self that thinks about and reflects on our lives. Our brains also do tons of stuff that we don't really know is happening. That's the unconscious part of our brain. It allows us to drive a car or carry babies while thinking about millions of other things. There is also a lot of creative energy in those unconscious depth dimensions. Much literature, music, and art comes from there. And it's here where we can enter into the contemplative, flowing nature of meditation. But I want to talk about the unconscious stuff that gets us in trouble and that troubles our minds. Someone may act in such a way that sets you off. Perhaps they cut you off when you're talking. Ooh. To you, it's a 6.7 on the Richter scale. To others, it just might be a tremor. But them cutting you off makes your neck and your shoulders tighten. Recognize those feelings in your body, those gut reactions. Know what the unconscious is and does. Many of you have seen or read about the police officer in the school that was caught on video throwing a young African-American woman's desk with her in it across the room. He was later fired for his actions. And we have seen this scenario play out many times, right? A white police officer is violent towards a person of color. I don't know the exact details and what exactly happened with that police officer and that young African-American woman, but let's imagine the worst. Let's say the young woman did not respect him. When he said move, she said no. Now, the unconscious baggage of that police officer, what he carried with him, I suspect, caused him to resort to anger and to violence. What was that baggage? An issue with self-respect, maybe, an issue with authority, perhaps unconscious racism. I don't believe he was acting consciously and rationally. And there is this myth. There's this myth that we are all rational and logical individuals, but in many instances, we are controlled by our past, by our feelings and emotions, and by our unconscious selves. So don't think, I could never act like that police officer. I am way too rational. We can act like that. Anytime we are triggered and anger takes over, especially if we happen to be male, it can lead to violence. Maybe this is an extreme case, but it is a case where our past gets the better of ourselves. If we are triggered, tweaked, and get angry, this is baggage to check. What kind of baggage did we bring with us today to this place? Many UUs grew up in different faith traditions. How many here today were raised as UUs? Can I see a show of hands? I see 4 or 5. I see some of this too, kind of. So how many of you were part of different faith traditions or no faith tradition before you became a UU? Almost everyone else. It has been said that ours is a chosen faith. So maybe more than other denominations and faith traditions, maybe more, we carry with us religious baggage. What sorts of things are in your religious luggage? Perhaps a love for singing, a love for theological reflection, a love for Hebrew. Put those in your carry-on. Or what about other baggage? I have met people so hurt by the religion of their past that they can't even step into a sanctuary like this. It would just bring up way too much for them. And unfortunately, clergy have a history of abusing their power, violating their professional and ethical boundaries, which has led to sexual harassment and sexual abuse. Rightfully so, this has led to victims to be deeply repelled by clergy. And people transfer their bad experiences onto different people and experiences that are similar. This is often called transference. So our official name is First Unitarian Church of Albuquerque. For some, that word church is a bit frightening, and I include myself in that bunch. Fortunately, I was able to attend a Unitarian Universalist seminary, and there I was able to unpack my theological baggage. I got a chance to redefine terms that had been jammed down my throat ever since I was a child. So for me, God was no longer a noun, a person, place, or thing, but simply a mystery. The sacred and the holy were no longer empty terms, but ways to describe felt experiences that were meaning-making events. And the Greek word for church is ecclesia, which means an assembly. It's the same Greek word that would describe a group of voters in ancient Athens. So to me, church became an assembly of people. Worship is an act of acknowledging what is of ultimate worth to you. Prayer, if done contemplatively, is basically meditation, getting in touch with your deeper self. In fact, our meditation music from earlier, Be Still, was inspired from what I remember as a child, singing psalms. Of course, with new adapted words. I have a Unitarian hymnal that my previous minister gave to me. It's from 1937. And let me tell you, you page through it, it is very Christian. Something drastically happened between then and now to our hymnal. Now we tend to think of ourselves as something more than Christian. And that is often called supersessionism. Supersessionism. Many Christians do the same thing when they discount Judaism and think that they are God's new chosen people. I heard Unitarian Universalist theology described as ABC, anything but Christian. It need not be that way, however. We can take elements from our personal religious past and our own denomination's past and make meaning of it. For example, a few years ago at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago, we students found out that the school had a 150-year-old silver communion set that had not been used in decades. We pulled it out, polished it, and had a communion service. It was hard to explain the religious feeling in that room, but there was a reverent mood, a reverence for all those that came before us. We can be proud that historically we are Protestant and that we still embody the Protestant principle of never treating anything as an absolute. In this community, we are encouraged to explore our religious past, but we are also encouraged to pack wisely, to contemplate what we are taking forward. Our past baggage is always with us, but it need not control us. We have to acknowledge that we constantly have assumptions. Everything goes through our own filters. Everything that has happened to us in the past clouds our present. Our baggage is here in the receiver, us. So if you start noticing an awful lot of people triggering you, or you are getting hooked into other people's baggage, I have a couple tips for you. First, take time for self-care. Take time for spiritual practices. These are those activities that ground us and balance us. So what I'm saying is, come to church. Take that walk. Take that hike. Read that book that you were always going to read but you never had time for. Take that yoga class. Journal, or whatever it is you do that restores your peace. Do it. Secondly, if someone does something that does trigger a reaction in your body, in your gut, or in your neck, or whatever, don't ignore that voice. Listen to that voice. Acknowledge it. You might want to have an inner dialogue with what I call little Jimmy. That's what I call him, but for you it might be little Brenda or little Tom or little Sarah. Listen to little Jimmy and say, thanks for alarming me. I hear you, but I got this one. Acknowledge that little Jimmy within, and politely pack him away in your checked luggage. And I think this is all easier to do if you've been maintaining a balance with self-care and spiritual practices. The formal examination of this process, therapy, is not a punishment, but a privilege to partake in. We have to restrain our past a bit, including our religious past. What we take with us matters. It is of utmost concern. After years and years of diligence, you can manage 85% of your baggage, but there is always that 15% to work on. What we take with us does matter. Our faith tradition is big enough to explore our whole selves. It is big enough to take with us our past, but it tells us we just maybe can't take everything with us. Sooner or later, we have to make wise choices of what to pack and unpack. What do we carry on? What luggage should be checked? We don't have to take our aunt's knitted sweater with us. Yet we can't relive or rewrite our formative past, but we can reflect on what to carry on with us. So just imagine for a moment, you are going to go on a long journey, a long vacation somewhere, and you have to fly by plane, and you need to pack a suitcase or two. All the things you pack are your past experiences. What will be checked? What will be a carry-on? That checked baggage will be put deep below your feet in a different compartment in the plane, but it's always there. It is good to know where it is. Maybe it will inspire a poem at another time. We are constantly packing and unpacking our lives. And we owe it to ourselves and each other to check our inappropriate baggage. Examine it from time to time. Do not ignore it, but recognize it. for what it is, decipher it thoroughly, and try to consciously figure out what is good to carry on. Everything cannot be taken with us, and it's worth spending a little extra money and time to check your baggage. In fact, if we don't, we may not bring the warm clothes we will need to weather the unexpected storms of our lives. Blessed be, and amen. Please rise in body.